Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Strikes Back. My name is George and you're listening to our weekly podcast with the boys Connor.
Hello.
And Benny.
Hi there.
Well, here we are, episode 152. Oh, baby. We actually have some news. We have some Star Wars news. Taika Waititi confirmed to be in the hot seat. We're going to give our opinions on that one, and some other Star Wars news with some updates on Mandalorian Season 2, plus, as we always talking about Disney stuff, but some stuff about Hercules coming out with the Russo Brothers that we're going to get into, plus later on Movie Book Club Episode 2 coming at you, brought to you by Benny this week. We're going to be discussing the Korean film directed by Chang-dong, Burning, quite a perplexing film, so I'm going to be interested to hear everyone's opinion on that one. But as we always like to do before we get into this week's news and topics, let's catch up on what everyone's been watching in lockdown. I think we've all been watching a little bit of Rick and Morty. I think I should put a disclaimer in here that I am still watching the first half of season 4, so I'm very behind. But I think you guys are fully up to speed. And
so you haven't watched the most recent episode?
No, I haven't. So you guys are fully up to speed, right? And have watched everything.
Oh yeah, Georgie. I don't know how you've watched any of season 4 without watching the whole thing. I think it's been so good.
Shocking. Right. Well, I don't know. Plug your ears for a second. Yeah, I think that I was a big fan of most of season 4 of what they've released so far. This might be my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because it kind of delivers in spades in ways that you weren't really expecting, which I suppose is kind of the whole point of the episode, to throw a few, spanner in the works, so to speak. I'm pretty sure this will be fairly divisive in fans that, feel like I know the criticisms of this already, which is like it's too meta, it's too up its own ass. It's basically Dan Harmon giving himself a stroke. That's
okay.
And
what's wrong with that?
It's dangerous territory. But I think that, it's done brazenly enough that I'm kind of okay with it. I really love this. I think it's, and it's, I watched it twice, right? Like I watched it the night it came out on Netflix, and then the next morning I rewatched it because there was so much jam-packed into this episode, just like so much stuff to deconstruct. One of my favorite throwbacks was his allusions to his own writing process in it.
Yeah, I think this is like the ideal Rick and Morty episode. It went up its own ass, twisted around, and went back up there again. And I just adored it. It's almost designed to piss off a lot of fans, which I really appreciate about it. It addresses so many of the predictable routes that the show could go and that people want the show to go, and it's almost just like, fuck you, we're not doing that. I've enjoyed this season so much, and I think this is the strongest episode yet. This really gives me, it really re-energizes me, and the fact that they're making like another 8 seasons or something already, I'm all aboard.
Yeah, they've definitely kept it quite ambiguous, but at the same time, as you said, kind of giving a middle finger to everyone that wants them to go down let's say a predictable route.
Yeah.
Which I kind of love. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like it's, you're always going to run into that issue with any type of series that goes on for more than, 3 or 4 seasons. Like, where do you take the characters? How do you progress the story in ways that, are both, like the biggest challenge is to keep your, initial audience, right? Like to kind of keep true to what the show is and who the show is and all that kind of stuff, but also
That's a really good point, man.
I'm with you
on that one.
Yeah, I don't know how show creators do it realistically. Like, I think it's, it just becomes so boring at some point.
Yeah, totally.
Am I missing something?
You paused out for a second there.
Gotcha.
Don't worry, we got the gist.
Yeah.
Listen
Essentially,
back
I don't know how they do it. How they play that game of finding where to put it. I think this is a really good way of doing it because it is a classic Rick and Morty episode, but also flies in the face of everything that's like, it tries to break the mold a bit.
And also at the risk of sounding like one of those, you have to be really smart to understand this show, which is a common running punchline about the fans. But man, this episode moves so fast in the crazy conceits it's throwing at the audience. I found it almost impossible to keep up just viewing it in real time. I can't wait to go back to it again.
Yeah, I'm
the
loving
second watching
season 4.
is a real must.
I gotta get through this stuff because I just watched the episode with the app, and Jerry makes with that little pink guy, and he makes the app, and that's just a great episode. And it felt like a classic Rick and Morty. While season 3, I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on why season 3 doesn't seem to have the same. Like, obviously Pickle Rick is awesome, but it just like the overall consistency wasn't there. And season 4, I've only just dabbled into it, but it's just feeling like a little more classic Rick and Morty to me, which I'm finding super satisfying.
I agree. And Rick and Morty co-creator Justin Roiland also had a new show premiere this week, which looks very similar, at least in the art style. Looks really good. I don't think we can get it anywhere in Australia yet, but I'm really keen to check that out too.
Excellent.
Nice one. I'll just quickly jump in here and finish what I've been watching. I watched a music documentary by a very successful Australian metal band called Parkway Drive. And this is like one of those ones where it's like I've got a lot of emotional investment in this, so I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I remember being at university in Canberra and seeing Parkway Drive twice in a basketball court, and just everyone going nuts, and to see them headlining Wacken Festival in Germany and Europe, like one of the biggest metal festivals, if not the biggest metal festival in the world. It's just like really satisfying. So yeah, really cool doco, very well put together. If you're into any kind of like creative stage production or project management even. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like it's a lot to do with them putting together their tour and the stage production and the sort of.
Is this the one that they released like 10 years ago?
No, they've done 4. They've done 3 or 4. Yeah, but this was the latest one, Viva the Underdogs. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well worth a watch. So yeah, that was. Yo.
So that's really funny, George. I was just watching some YouTube video yesterday, and this wicked fucking metal song riff just started playing in a cutaway, and I shazammed it, and it was Parkway Drive. And my only knowledge of them is that you're a fan.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah. Oh, good.
These guys are awesome.
Which song?
I can't remember the name of it. Sorry,
Vice Grip or something. And yeah, they've become more commercial, and they've definitely made a lot of success in Europe. So they've got a lot more of a European metal sound that they used to. But yeah, very cool band. Very, very cool band.
I used to listen to them on repeat.
Yeah. I remember you and me used to froth over Horizons, the second album. Good times.
Yeah. I think that's still my favorite of theirs.
Yeah. They got some good stuff. Connor, what else have you been watching, man?
Fuck all, man.
Hell yeah.
I've been going through Billions. It's keeping my interest, but it's not like I have much to report on that.
Cool.
What if we had like 10 days since an episode of the pod? I swear to God, I must have watched 15 movies or something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough to still be working, so it's I don't have an enormous amount of time, and I'm trying to move house right now, so that saps up enough time on its own.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I have nothing but time, and one of the things I've been doing this past couple of weeks has been playing through Castlevania Symphony of the Night again, classic PS1 video game. This is just my favorite experience in the world playing through this game. I love it so much. But I got so into it, it did get me actually back onto the Netflix series, which I had watched the first season of back when it came out, and we reviewed. Didn't love it. It didn't really capture any of the things I loved about the game, certainly, and just on its own, even I wasn't really blown away. But I realized when I went back to the series, I thought I'd watched the first episode of season 2 when season 3 came out, and just given so little of a shit that I didn't go back to it. Turns out I actually watched the first 2 episodes of season 2 and just didn't remember them at all. So I just said fuck it and jumped in from the 3rd episode. And I got to say, season 2 was such an improvement on season 1. I thought it was longer. They really had more time to flesh out the plot and the characters. Whereas that first season was just such like a test, like a little intro to the world. I thought it was so much
like
better.
We've got this interesting art direction, like we've this kind of property, like, huh? What do you think? And season 2 was like, all right, well, we obviously have enough of an interest. We can actually do something with this. And they did, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and then I blew right through season 3 as well, which again was even longer, and also introduced a character played by Bill Nye, which you had not mentioned to me, Connor. That would have got me right back into the show.
I might have I thought I mentioned it. Maybe not.
We have audio evidence.
But I mean, whenever I mentioned Castlevania, your eyes would just glaze over in this kind of like look of like pity upon me, like, oh, you like that?
Yeah,
do you?
Yeah, I really hadn't quite expected to come back to it, but I again thoroughly enjoyed season 3. It went in some really fucking weird directions, really interesting stuff. And Bill Nye, man, he somehow is able to ooze charm still just out of that somewhat limited animation, which was outstanding.
Yeah, Bill Nye and Jason Isaacs, I thought both of those were really like good gets for Castlevania, and both.
And Richard Armitage, the whole cast, they're all really good in that show. And that got me so into the mood. I still hadn't had enough of that kind of world, so I checked out an old anime film that I haven't watched in many years. The entirety of which is on YouTube, because I think it doesn't have a distributor at the moment in really great quality. And I would love to see what you think of this one, Connor, because I think as an anime film by one of the greatest animation studios, it offers a look at a similar world, but so much more beautifully. It's called Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. I think it was made about 20 years ago now. And it's kind of a formative anime film for a lot of people, I think, because it's one of those names you hear when you're first getting into it and you check it out. It's just one of the most beautiful animated films ever put on screen. I think kind of plot-wise, it's maybe a little generic, and, you know, it has its stumbles with, you know, the English dub and stuff. This was early in anime, earlier. But it is so gorgeous, and I really got into it. I didn't think I'd sit there and watch the whole thing, but I'd like to see what you think of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I finally watched Hell or High Water, the Chris Pine film, written by Taylor Sheridan, who wrote and directed Wind River. Man, this guy's just a master of the modern Western. It was such a good movie. And what was really interesting about it is you could totally make almost exactly the same film and just set it, 100-something years ago.
Right.
Just have everyone on horses instead of cars, and it would work exactly as well. Really enjoyed that. And I also checked out the World of Stand-Up Comedy has been very kind to me lately, because we had Middleditch and Schwartz last week. And this week, I didn't even realize this was happening. Leno and Woodley, the classic Australian comedy duo, reunited.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was funny timing, considering Schwartz releasing theirs as well.
Yeah, so that was an Amazon Prime exclusive. I watched that, really enjoyed that too. And Georgie, for you, I finally checked out Gore Verbinski's The Ring.
You've never checked that out?
Enough, I'd never seen it.
Holy shit.
Not the American one, no.
Dude,
funnily enough, I really wanted to watch the Silent Hill film, which it turns out you cannot find anywhere. You can't get it anywhere. It's not on anything. It's not on Google. No, you can't. I would literally have to buy it on Blu-ray on eBay or something. So I'll have to wait for that one. But yeah, The Ring, finally checked out. Really, really cool movie. I don't really remember the original very well. I saw it so long ago. But man, Gore Verbinski just has such an eye. His movies are so gorgeous. The way he shoots.
That one hasn't aged a day, in my opinion.
Yes. Even like for 2003 or something it was.
Yeah,
even all the hair and fashion and stuff. It looks pretty good.
It's got that really grey, green, oppressive, stark look about it that is so effective and and timeless.
Yeah, and
have you seen
what I
Ringu?
thought was really interesting about this movie is the original, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I thought was really interesting about this movie is it plays kind of generic. It really follows the beats of a horror movie like this, albeit masterfully done in a lot of ways. But it gets to the point where it gets to the end of the movie, or you think it's the end, and you're like, yeah, okay, that was kind of a standard kind of haunting film. But then it has this whole extra bit after it, this little coda, this epilogue that changes the whole thing, and it was a really fun kind of addition to what it seemed at first to be more of a standard story. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, more of a thriller by today's standard, I would say as well. That was at the time in high school, like the scary movie. It freaks people out.
I haven't watched it in years, but my memory is that it's pretty freaky. Is it not freaky?
It has that one killer scare, man. I saw her face. Woof. I think I'd read about that in some list of amazing jump scares, and it still caught me really off guard. But other than that, yeah, mostly kind of plays like a thriller.
Yeah, but a fantastic film.
Yeah,
we should
so
put
that's
that on Movie
I watched
Pop
a
Pop.
lot more, but nothing so much of note.
Okay, cool. Well, we actually got some stories. Everything's heating up back in the world of Hollywood. Benny, why don't you kick us off with a little bit of Star Wars news?
Well, yeah, we finally got what seemed like such an inevitability. Taika Waititi is directing and co-writing a Star Wars for us.
One Star Wars.
Yeah, this was announced on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, of course. I don't think this really comes as a surprise to anyone, does it?
No.
No, it's not a surprise, but I can't say I'm particularly happy about it.
You didn't like that episode that he did for
perfectly honest,
The Mandalorian? I love that episode, yeah.
Look, no, I like that. I just feel as though when you watch a Taika Waititi film, you're like, oh, that's a Taika Waititi film. And, when you watch that final thing, The Mandalorian, you could have told me that was anyone else, and I'd have been like, cool. Like, it's not as though he really put his fingerprint on that episode. And I'm not saying that's... No. I mean, if I told you that
opening
was
scene
actually,
with the two stormtroopers,
if I told you that was
banter.
Joss Whedon, what would have you said?
Totally.
Like, you're not gonna. It's not really like
it had a unique it had a unique element to it.
Look, I'm not taking away anything that he did with that episode. I think that it's still one of my favorite episodes of that series. But I feel as though, particularly in the context of him doing a film, it's not going to feel like a Waititi film. And I feel like they're kind of tempting fate, because even Waititi doing a Marvel film felt as though they were going to kind of sap a bunch of the I guess the flavor that makes him really interesting to watch, and they got away with it. But I feel as though there's a lot more room to move in the Marvel universe than there is in the Star Wars universe. So I just kind of feel as though, on the one hand, I really don't want, I want Taika Waititi to be really successful in Hollywood, but also I don't want him to be kind of like the flavor of the month. And I don't want him to, there's a cat. Look at that.
Introducing my cat.
And I don't want him to be like, diluted down by a massive IP or a massive franchise, something like Star Wars, which so far there's not much in the Star Wars universe that has really blown me away in terms of like, this has someone's artistic stamp on it.
Yeah, Star Wars definitely did Lord and Miller dirty, so hopefully this is not a repeat of that. But I feel like, how many times can they make that mistake? They've been so bad with directors. I feel like if Waititi could go into the MCU, into the third entry in a franchise, and as you said, really put his mark on it, I like to hope that they would be getting him on board for this, so he could do the same. And if this is just a one-off or an original film that he's co-writing, presumably he'll have a big hand in the development of everything around it. I'm definitely have mixed thoughts about it too, though, because I have mixed feelings about what he did with the Thor franchise. But like I said, this will be its own thing that he's developing. So
I feel as though Star Wars is in a spot where they need to make a decision on where this franchise is going, because they've tried to ape the original trilogy and give it the new lick of paint. They've tried the spin-off. Rogue One was a success. Solo wasn't really a success. Are they going down the trilogy format? Are they going down the single film format? Just Taika Waititi just come in and do one film and then, hey, see you later. What is the model going forward? That's what I'm most intrigued about. And, is this one of many, or is this, the one and then see you later Taika, and maybe he goes and does another Marvel film? That's what I'm most intrigued to see how this pans out.
Yeah, spot on, Georgie. They're in such a weird place with Star Wars right now. Do you guys have any specific thing you'd like to see with TV tackle?
Not really. I like I said, it doesn't really feel his, it doesn't really feel like a Waititi property.
He's got to do something more like Bounty Hunter-esque in the Mandalorian way. I don't think Waititi is necessarily, is he going to nail sort of Jedi lore-esque original trilogy kind, the main Star Wars films? Like, is he going to nail that, or is his sensibilities better off in like more of the tactile Star Wars? A junkyard kid becomes a bounty hunter and it's a ragtag group. There's different characters. Here's the funny guy. Here's the Korg-esque guy, all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the best way for him to go. But, maybe it would be more interesting for him to go the other way and not play it safe, because ragtag bounty hunter film, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, shit, yeah. But we got Solo, and it wasn't really that great. Granted, there was a million production troubles there, so that has to kind of be a big caveat.
But they're also,
can they make it work?
Solo is also hobbled by the fact that they had an IP to live up to in terms of, or just a name to live up to, and that if you're trying to make like a kind of a more gritty, as you said, like junker, kind of almost Western style, you're not going to be able to do that with Solo. But yeah, look, I think that Star Wars in general needs to realign itself. It needs to get some really solid hits out, and then start doing this announcing thing. Because, this is announcement, in the last year, 5, 6, about potential,
yeah, I think we're in DCU,
and, films
DCU
that
territory.
We may or may not be getting. And I'm at this point, it's almost beyond that. It's taking the piss at this point. And as a fan, I'm kind of like, I don't believe you anymore. And B, I just don't care. I want them to say, hey, so-and-so is doing a standoff or a trilogy film on this particular piece of lore. It's going to be an event film style. They're not going to touch the original, characters. So it's going to be its own thing. So, people will, but you don't have as much people bitching and moaning about, oh, you've changed this character, you've done this character dirty or anything like that. Go to an original piece or base it off the lore a bit or whatever you have to do.
Just add in Boba Fett. And definitely add in Boba Fett.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as there's some kind of callback.
And add C-3PO. That's it. And Anakin, and that's it. All right.
If they can, and make sure that the main character at some point says, I don't have a good feeling about this.
Yeah. I have a bad. I don't have.
My feelings aren't good about this particular situation.
Yeah, the scenario at hand is making me feel rather negative.
No, I think if they can get that, if they can get the series back on track in terms, and I'm saying this as someone
can
who wasn't,
Connor? Can they? I somehow just.
Of course they can. Of course they can.
But can they? They have the ability to, but within the current framework and the people who are the decision makers. Is that the way they want to push things? That's more, I guess, my question.
I think I've pitched on this very show before, and I still would love to see this. Our next story renders this impossible, essentially. But I think I said I would have loved to see a Taika Waititi directed Boba Fett film starring Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords as just an Inspector Gadget kind of figure who is really useless at his job but keeps failing upwards, because I'm pretty sure that's what Boba Fett essentially did in the original trilogy. But speaking of that, Tamara Morrison is set to return as Boba Fett for The Mandalorian Season 2. Now, he, of course, played Jango Fett in the prequel trilogy. I believe he voiced Boba Fett in subsequent productions and went back to the original movies. So, Georgie, you just mentioned rather cynically throwing Boba Fett in to a property. How do you feel about this?
Well, he was in episode 5, right? At the end there, he was walking. Which
I think was the weak point of the series.
Yeah, you guys didn't like that episode. That was the second one down by Dave Filoni, the one on Tatooine. But that to me, I was that's Boba Fett, 100%.
Yeah, so not like 100%.
Do you remember right at the end? Right at the end, it was like a little sort of tag teaser thing, and he's just walking up to the dead body on that big desert plain, and it's sort of like dusk or dawn. Yeah, and it was like
barely registered.
It was like, that's
I knew
Boba.
someone walked up to her. I didn't realize it was Boba. Like, did you see him?
No, but it was just like, it felt.
Isn't Boba? I'm trying to.
So I'm unsurprised.
Now this is throwing me for a loop.
But that leads. But basically, what I'm saying here is like, I'm not surprised by this news. I thought he was coming 100%.
This is throwing me for a loop. Isn't Boba Fett dead in that timeline at that point?
Do you know anything about Star Wars, Tom? He's been resurrected that many times.
Fucking bring him back. I'm going to be so pissed.
They're Darth Mauling this motherfucker out of that Sarlacc pit.
Sarlacc pit can't stop Boba Fett,
cowards.
baby.
Dude, he's come out in the comic.
Unbelievable.
In episode 37B.
Spineless fucks.
Well, it's so, it's really like so wanting to have their cake and eat it too, because they make this entire Boba Fett series starring not Boba Fett. And then they chuck Boba Fett in anyway.
That genuinely upsets me.
I think this is cool because Tamara Morrison.
Such cowardice.
No,
it's not cool. Fuck that. Fucking spineless.
Tamara Morrison is fantastic, so it's good to see him rejoining the series. And I feel like this could be this could potentially be like a misdirect. He could be playing, because he plays all of the clones. He could be playing Rex from the animated series or something.
Which all the fans seem to be very, very complimentary on how Clone Wars has wrapped up.
I've heard had a kind of rough start and shitty middle, but great end. So
maybe chuck on a couple episodes there towards the end.
All I saw was some behind the scenes footage of them doing the final lightsaber battle, and they did what is it called? Motion capture. They did motion capture for the final one between whatever her name is, Asaha or something like that. Ahsoka and Darth Maul. And
was Ray Park doing it?
Yeah, they got him back and they got him
for
to do
real?
the actual.
Dude,
it's actually a
sick.
cool little. It's actually a really cool little thing about, because they've never done motion capture for that, and you look at the style of the fight and how different it looks, from an animation point of view, of when they're just literally just animating it from, eyeballing it, to when they have an actual actor moving and embodying that character. It's kind of cool to see the differences there.
Yeah, and evidently the animation is stunning in this. So maybe I've got to dial in a couple episodes when, at whatever point these Disney Plus shows come out. Whoever knows. But, our boy Elon Tusk is in the house. Oh, we're going to segue really badly there. Benny, take it away.
Now, speaking of really unsurprising news, I think everyone has been seeing this coming for a long time. Tom Cruise is teaming up with Elon Musk and NASA to film a movie aboard the International Space Station. Every report I saw kind of leading this was just saying, Tom Cruise set to die in space.
So he hasn't actually confirmed on that yet. Like, he said that he's like investigating it.
So is this going to be a Mission Impossible film? Because, you know, the age-old thing is like, you know, they keep one up. He's gone up that Dubai tower. He's held onto a plane. Next, he's got to go into space. Same with Vin Diesel as well.
My understanding was that it was a
pretty
separate
soon.
project.
Okay.
But even if it's not, I mean,
I'd be
is
down
anyone
if
going
it
to insure
wasn't.
this film? Is anyone going to insure this film? Like, that's another level of. I mean, they all kind of talk about how dangerous the stuff that Tom Cruise does, but he doesn't really do anything that general stunt people wouldn't do. Essentially, he's not.
I don't know,
going
man. That plane thing when he strapped himself to a plane for Mission Impossible one, that was pretty fucking.
But that's the thing,
insane.
right? Like, he was literally strapped to a plane. Like, things would have had to go really wrong for him to be in actual danger. Like, it's fucking scary and it's impressive. I'm not saying I would do it.
I mean, he nearly killed himself in the last Mission Impossible too, when he was jumping between those buildings.
And Elon Musk, man, that guy's a cowboy. He sent a rocket up into like land on Mars or whatever, and they didn't do any bacterial cleansing on the outside of the spacecraft. So if like a bacteria from Earth came there and like wiped out they're like an entire species or like all flora and fauna because it's from a different planet. Yeah.
Onto Mars.
Yeah.
All those species, that flora and fauna on Mars.
Yeah. You know what I mean.
Something?
You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Like there's microbacteria and stuff. There's microbacteria. They found that. They found a few small not like, you know, not like a yeah. Anyway, let's move on from this.
And anyway,
let's move on from this.
Podcast.
It really reminds me of that scene in Thank You for Smoking with Rob Lowe talking about that space movie and cigarettes.
Yeah.
It just feels like like this movie is entirely based around the stunt.
Yeah, and like for me,
oh, what a pose! I love that. Man.
I was thinking about this the other day. The thing that made me think about it is like, is it that much better if they do it in actual space? Like, there's a lot of films that I've watched.
Well, we'll find out, I guess.
In the last couple of years, where you're kind of like, "Fuck, man, that looks really good." I don't know how much more impressed I'm going to be if they're just actually shooting in space. I'm like, cool, I guess. Like, this was just extremely expensive and more or less got the same shit.
It's the difference between going to the, you know, JJ going to Abu Dhabi, going to the desert versus getting a massive truck with sand coming on the back lot and dumping it out.
I mean,
it's the real authentic space, dude. The real thing. Yeah. You know, you're living and breathing space.
I can go to Abu Dhabi.
Tom Cruise, he'll be there. I can't
go to space. Like, there's a slight difference.
Well, Elon Tusk can take him, man. He can do anything. He's the second coming of Jesus.
He is a loose cannon.
What is it? A-A12? What's the kid's name?
Apparently, I was kind of skimming article headlines, and apparently California register for names and all that. We're like, no. Nice try, but no.
Yeah. Listen, this is a great
I get it that they're alternative
stunt.
and all, but fuck me, man. Like, how much do you hate your kid?
Listen, this is a great publicity stunt. It makes sense. You know, Tom Cruise is waiting to always level it up. I don't know how great this will actually turn out to be because, you know, I'm messing around before. Connor, you're right. Like, what is like him looking in a spaceship going to look like? It's not that much different. They nailed it in Life. They nailed it in all kinds. They nailed it in Interstellar. They've nailed it many times. So, yeah, let's see how it pans out.
As always, it comes down to if the movie is actually any good, because the gimmick of just looking of him actually being in space. I mean, these movies all look as if they are actually in space anyway now.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And I'm also really interested because, like, you know, if you look at what's the Canadian astronaut's name? Guy that did a lot of publicity when he was up at the space station, sang with his guitar and all that. Chris Hadfield, something like that. Anyways, when you see him up there and you compare pictures to when he's down on Earth, like all the blood or something like goes into the face, and it makes him like look a lot different in space. So I wonder if like Tom Cruise is going to get up there and be like, "Can I get makeup on this?" Or
Yeah, I'm not doing this. I look like a monster.
And then all the space movies, they're like, we went, that are shot on Earth. They're like, we went that extra mile and deformed his face like it happens in space. What do we got next, Benny?
Yeah, I think this entire week is actually kind of unsurprising news because Disney is moving forward with a live-action Hercules film with the Russo brothers producing, which is an interesting fit.
Is this a good thing? Russo brothers, I'm feeling like a very hand-to-hand combat vibe, whilst they still keep the comic book elements in there. They don't make as sort of stripped back and gritty, or whatever you want to call it, that they made Captain America. It's still fun. It still has life. It still has personality to it. It's not like a Chris Nolan Batman film, but it still has that tactile nature to it. I think Russo brothers, if that's the path they're going to go down with Hercules, with have these sort of really interesting battles and whatnot, they seem like a really great choice.
All of this is secondary, because the first question that needs to be answered is this going to be a musical? Is this going to be a shot-for-shot remake of
I don't believe it is.
I looked up. I couldn't find anything on it.
I saw a quote from them, and they basically said there's going to be music in it, but it's not necessarily going to be a one-to-one of the original, and they love the music in the original, so they're going to be, taking songs, paying homage, but I don't think it's going to be like the Mulan approach.
Yeah. See, just listening to you now, that doesn't really give us much to work off. Because, does that mean that they're just going to replace it with new songs? Does that mean that they're going to is it going to be more of a musical? Or are they just going to, again, pay homages, which is what Mulan did. They've got homages to the original songs in there, but not actual, just everyone bursting into song. So,
have you seen Mulan, have you?
No, that's what they've said. Fuck you, smug piece of shit.
I got some mixed thoughts about this one because I love the Disney film, the animated one. That fell right in that sweet spot of the right time to see that for me. And I still love it to this day. I think it's a fantastic musical, absolutely beautiful movie. I don't know what direction I think they should take on this, because if they do the Mulan kind of version, then it's just a fucking Hercules movie. I don't think anyone in the world wants to watch another Hercules movie, because generally they mostly suck. There was that Rock one and the Kellen Lutz one. I think they came out in the same year, 2014 or something. And I don't know, does anyone want to see any more of this? All this sword and sandal stuff, the modern versions, they're fairly underwhelming.
Put it this way. This is the way I look at it. Hercules is coming out. Disney is going and cycling through everything one by one. So Hercules is coming out, right? And we can get, director X, random director, person who's going to tick all the check boxes and bow down to the Disney overlords. And someone like Russo brothers has probably a little bit more wiggle room to, with the pedigree that they bring forward and the relationships that they have with Feige and the track record with Marvel, they've probably got a little bit more of a say. So hopefully that's what I'm kind of holding on to here. I'm if there's anyone that's going to do one of these live action ones well, I think it's probably going to be those guys, because they've consistently delivered.
I mean, they've delivered within the confines of the Marvel universe, certainly, but that feels very different. And you can say the same thing of
but Russo brothers have classically always been from they started it with Community and comedy, and didn't they do Marley and Me or something? They're quite versatile guys. So
so are all the directors that, or a lot of the directors that did Marvel. Right? If you look at... do
you want vanilla director X to come in and do Hercules? I'd rather have somebody who's maybe going to bring in, something different, but has a great track record.
I would have said that about Guy Ritchie. I would have said that about...
I wouldn't have.
Love him or hate him, Guy Ritchie brings flavor. Yeah, but he brings flavor. Again, love him or hate him.
He didn't do Aladdin.
That's my point.
That never felt like a passion project for him. No, because I think the Russos, who of course aren't directing this, but I think they're kind of comparable to someone like Jon Favreau, who definitely did one of the more successful and interesting ones of these in The Jungle Book. which I don't love, but it's fucking so much better than The Lion King.
Oh, well, I think everyone's out on that.
That video that you sent us, Ben, about the guy that was analyzing the music. Oh, no one heard me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, the video that you sent, Ben, about the music in the Disney remakes and the way that they talked about Jungle Book, I thought was real. Like, I think that speaks to Favreau's ability to go into that. I mean, it doesn't really, apparently he forgot how to do it for Lion King, but, like, I just, for me, attaching the Russo brothers to something like this just doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence. I feel as though at the moment, this feels a little bit more good company men than bringing in, competent directors. And I'm not saying that they're not competent. They're not even directing, they're producing. No, I'm not saying in any ways that they're not competent, but I am saying that this doesn't really sound as though they're trying to find a unique vision for the remake. It's just like, hey, who do we have on payroll that we know is going to, deliver in one way or another? Favreau busy? Let's get the Russo brothers.
Speaking of unique visions as well, as a property, that original is such a mess. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But it is insane. I mean, the opening song of that thing is called The Gospel Truth. The entire framing of the movie is this, gospel choir of muses singing about Greek myth, the gospel truth. It's utterly bizarre. I don't know how it came about, and I don't know how they can reconcile that for like another modern version. But
again, they can't. They shouldn't. They should not try and remake Hercules. This is my point.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't work.
Anyway,
I hate Hercules.
In other news, Nick Cage has been cast as Joe Exotic, the Tiger King guy, for a series from the showrunner of American Vandal. This is pretty unsurprising casting once again, right?
How is this unsurprising?
Really? Like the fucking meme lord of Nick Cage.
He's never done a TV show. It seems like a meme. It seems like a meme.
Exactly. It's the most obvious choice in the world. Like, who's going to get to play the craziest real-life person? Another crazy person.
I mean, it doesn't... I would be upset if they got someone better than Nicolas Cage to play this. I really don't feel like I feel like Tiger King has had his day. Like, that shit is done. And they're gonna force us to watch a Tiger King film. And they're either gonna take, like, the only way that I'll be interested in watching a Tiger King film is if they take the piss. If they take themselves too seriously, they can get fucked.
Yeah, and hopefully with that creative on board, because American Vandal season 1 is the only one I've seen, but it was so good. Hopefully they take a direction like that.
It almost needs to be like that.
This feels a little to me,
or something like that. Somehow.
Like Tommy Wiseau.
That movie that Seth Rogen and Franco did. Yeah, that one.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe something like that would work here. Sorry, Benny, what were you saying?
A bit tongue in cheek, but also like telling the story.
Just that this really feels to me like when when a company on Twitter or something posts a meme that's 6 months old, trying to get in on the action. They're like, hey kids, we're cool too, and it's like, yeah, we got some Nick Cage, zany Nick Cage as the Tiger King guy that you all cared about for a little while ago. I watched all of Tiger King, actually. I don't think I brought it up on the show. I don't like it very much.
Just because the people
the story was interesting, but I would have rather just read an article about it or something, because the way that these true crime sort of things draw it all out and editorialize it. Like,
after episode 3,
I was interested in it. Like, I thought it was bizarre. It was this really like kind of wild character study on just
nice one, bro.
Kind of stereo. Oh, did I cut out again?
Yeah, you're going.
I've been a douche.
Yeah,
they were despicable characters. I agree with you. And after episode 3, I think I gassed out. And I think what we saw with Making a Murderer was, season 1, it was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. Even my parents watched it. I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. My parents are watching a Netflix show and telling me about it. But then season 2 came out and nobody gave a fuck.
Tiger King. Yeah.
So
and I think that's the thing, right? Like, this is such a just lightning in a bottle. It's like Tiger King, like, whoa, that was wild, and then like on to the next thing. This isn't something that's really going to have legs. nor should it. So yeah, I'm happy if we just never if this goes like
I'm happy too.
And it's never spoken about again. Fine with that.
So
then we'll review it though.
Nick Cage,
no.
Tiger King. The jury's out. The jury is out. Question of the week. We've got a question from Nick Martinez, a bit of a fun one here. Kind of, I don't really know how to frame this one, actually. Maybe fun. Maybe fun isn't the word. I have a random question. Does Thanos unknowingly save half of humanity from the coronavirus? ... Benny?
I guess where my mind goes with this is because in a lot of aspects, the MCU does ostensibly take place in our world, except it's got all the superheroes in it. So did the coronavirus happen in the 5-year gap between Infinity War and Endgame? Because, the MCU is now in the future. So this time period has passed in that time. I don't think they're ever going to answer that question in the MCU.
Yeah.
Nor should they.
No, do it. I can make a movie about it. Doctor Strange being an actual doctor.
Revenge of COVID. Connor, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I seriously don't.
Okay.
All right, so let's say yes, he did.
Yes. Well done, Thanos.
He knew.
Wherever this originated from, he snapped it.
Alrighty, let's cap it off with Movie Book Club episode 2. Last week we had Connor's pick of what the fuck is it?
Prisoners.
Prisoners.
That's the one. Prisoners, and that was a lot of fun. And last week we let you guys know that we were watching Burning, directed by Chang-dong, and this was Benny's pick. So, Benny, before we get into the film itself, why don't you give us a bit of a rundown of why you picked this film for Movie Book Club?
Yeah, sure thing. Full spoilers for Burning. This is the idea is that you've all watched it out there yourselves, so go check it out if you haven't. Come back. I watched this movie, I don't know, 6 months ago, within the last year sometime. Basically, because the sources that I always check for word of mouth, I just heard so many great things about this film. And the trailer, I think we actually reviewed on the show a long time ago, and I remember being very intrigued by it. Seeing Stephen Yeun from The Walking Dead, I've always really liked him, and it was interesting to see him in a fully Korean film. And yeah, I watched this movie. I don't know how blown away I was at the time, because like I said, I had very high expectations. I think I actually watched it in 2 sittings, which I never really do, but it's a 2.5-hour movie. I must have chucked it on a bit late, and I got so tired because it's quite languidly paced, this film.
Slow burn.
Yeah, and then it was all said and done, and I just found myself thinking of it often as the months went by. It just kept coming back to me, which so like most of the movies I watch, I almost never give a second thought after they're done. So that really stood out to me. So I was keen to give it another go, and I just really wanted to know what you guys thought of it, because it's a very moody film, very up to interpretation, a lot of it. And I think with the the success of Parasite and the eyes on Korean film at the moment, I thought it'd be a good time to look at it.
Yeah, nice one. So we've watched the film. Full spoilers, everyone. So I think to your point, Benny, this film is very much a slow burn. Connor, what was your overall?
Boring as batshit for the first half, at least.
What's your overall take on this film? Top line thoughts, I guess.
Not blown away, but certainly a movie that is worth reflecting on. And in terms of like the craft of shooting and there's hints of really good craft in this. But yeah, Highline is very much weighted towards the back half. Front half was slow, verging on boring. And yeah, just it's a thinker. Like it's
interesting. I felt this film was almost quite similar to Parasite in a way. I hadn't read any synopsis. I went in completely blind. I'm watching this guy and this situation unfold with this girl, and I'm very intrigued. This film's got this anxiety-ridden feeling about it, and it's not like this horror movie, you know, high-pitched strings or like this low-droning Hans Zimmer, Trent Reznor thing, but there's this overall sense of like this social anxiety in this film that is so intriguing. And you're trying to, this whole time I'm like, this is really slow. Like these are very day-to-day circumstances kind of unfolding, but there's this underlying inquisitiveness that this film is presenting. It's not showing you everything. It's keeping things ambiguous. It's keeping things mysterious. And I found that like a very, very compelling part of the film. And I think one of the big takeaways from me from it's just sort of a narrative storytelling perspective.
Yeah, so I got to tell you guys, I cannot recommend highly enough giving this movie 6 months and watching it again, because I was fucking riveted start to finish, which for a movie this slow was surprising to even me. I'd forgotten a lot of what happens to it in it. Like there's so many little details kind of scattered along the way in this 2.5 hour runtime. And I like 2.5 hours, I didn't check my phone once, which even I really struggle to do when I'm watching things at home. I just sat there from the first frame to the last, just so glued to the screen. What struck me about watching it a second time, knowing kind of where it ends up, because it has a really interesting ending, was how purposeful everything was. Like every little detail in it, I don't, you know, so much of it seems so mundane, and yet I don't think you could cut a single detail. I just love
you don't think you cut a single detail?
Yeah. I know that. I know that's crazy. I can imagine where you're coming from, because, like I said, I pretty much fell asleep the first time I watched it. But yeah, just the way this movie deals with perception and subjectivity is so fascinating to me. So the character of Ben, played by Steve Yeun, he doesn't really show up until like the second act.
Like 40 minutes in.
45, yeah.
Yeah, and because I love this movie's almost in 3 chapters. It's the first chapter, which is just Jong-soo and Jaime, just kind of their relationship. Then the middle, which is the 3 of them, those 2 and Ben,
The love
and
triangle.
then the end, which is just Jong-soo kind of dealing with Ben. But what I loved so much about, and I'm so happy to say, I think this is one of like the all-time greatest fictional Bens ever put to screen. I love how, with the exception of like 1.5 scenes, everything you're seeing about this character is essentially Jong-soo's perception of him.
Yeah.
Because on paper, there is so little that happens in this film. You could describe it in a couple of sentences. And in the most literal sense, it's basically about a killer, or is it? You know, you're thinking, is this guy a killer or not? Did he kill Jaime? And I just love how it is so able to delve into that question so thoroughly and in so many different ways that you can come away from this movie having no idea either way if that is the case. And I love, I was reading, apparently Lee Chang-dong asked Steve Yeun in the final scene when Jong-soo stabs him to death and burns him, he's like, okay, I want you to play this whichever way you think is the case, whether you think Ben's killed Jaime or not, play it what you believe to be the case.
Wow.
And that's what we see in the film. So apparently Steve Yeun is the only person who knows whether Ben is the killer or not.
Wow.
And that's, of course, you know, we can all make up our own minds, but I just love that. And I love how it actually goes to pains to give evidence in both directions, but just nothing conclusive. There is nothing conclusive. And I just think there's so many ways you could read this movie. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that. That's what I mean when I'm saying, like, it's something that you can think about. And, you know, I'm trying to think if are like what scenes I would have taken out or made, you know, less long, or And I guess that's kind of the catch-22 of this, right? Like, you don't know that where you ended up at where you ended up would have been as good if you hadn't taken quite the same journey to get there. So I mean, I'll give it that. Yeah, George.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things about what you said, Benny, that really stand out to me. But I think overall, this film is improved by the ending. You know, if without that ending, you know, if this had just kind of been a sort of fleeting little like walk off into the distance, like, you know, that would have just been really, really unsatisfying. So it just adds that poignancy at the end that is the really nice sort of full stop to the story that I found really effective. And the idea of perception, and again, like Parasite, this film deals with class. It deals with the sort of the cycle that you can get in. You know, it deals with the perception about, like, aspect. You know, like
his like vision of Ben, as you mentioned, Ben. Like it's his kind of perception. You know, like little comments that he makes about, like, you know, how like these people are, and this kind of obvious, you know, uncomfortability with not Ben per se, but what Ben represents. And again, I think it's a really interesting thread to pull on.
And another reading of this film that I'm not sure I really had the first time I watched it is how you can look at it pretty much all being in Jong-Soo's mind. Basically, the situation of him having, you know, this experience with a girl who he falls in love with, and then she just moves on, and kind of the way that in that experience, the way that they're, you know, your ex's new partner or something seems to you, like they seem like a fucking monster and you hate them to death, and you will rationalize any crazy story you can other than this girl just didn't like you that much and she left you. Like, she just doesn't want to be with you. And, you know, this entire crazy noir, like, mystery spirals out of his mind, where the simple answer is, you know, she didn't want to be with you or something.
There's a fantastic metaphor towards the beginning of this film where they're in her apartment and there's the reflection of the Seoul Tower, and she says it comes in for a couple minutes or a couple seconds every afternoon, and then they are, you know, getting it on, and he's looking at that, and then it disappears, and that's basically like their relationship. But he takes that fleeting, like, quite an interesting little moment and expands upon that in his mind. And you know, this film also taps on, you know, male ownership over females. You know, his one comment in there, I think, was very, very purposefully put in there, and a line or a moment that seems like not a highlight, as it were, because it's not a good moment, but a moment that it sticks out in my mind from the film. Sort of compound all the themes and whatnot. And it's not a big part of the film, you know, he doesn't do anything else to this, but just the way that
I would
is
actually
all
say
put.
That, you know, the way that I saw it was that it was a big part of the film, like right throughout. It's just kind of like, it's that angsty, you know, sense of entitlement, you know, that because she, you know, looked your way, or because she gave you some level of warmth, or even, you know, slept with you or whatever it is, that you are therefore entitled to something more.
Yeah.
With no virtue of you actually bringing anything to the table. He is so void of any kind of agency throughout this entire movie, that you're kind of like, I had zero sympathy. Yeah, I had zero sympathy for him the entire time. And the only time he gets some agency is when he's obsessing over how someone has something that he doesn't.
Yeah, he's very much a follower. You know, he's a dopey guy, and he's not really got much gusto behind him. And I think really the only time in the film,
I wouldn't even say like he's just nothing.
He does start making decisions. I suppose he starts following him in the car. That's when he's really making sort of a decisive decision. But up until that point in the film, he's just like, we're coming to your house. Oh, okay, you're coming. You know, he doesn't say, hey, listen, I'm you know, this is my private space, this is my private time. He just cops it, and that's his sort of the framing of his character.
And such an important moment, and I think one of the keys to the film is, of course, the last thing he ever says to her, which is he basically calls her a whore.
Yeah.
Because she took her top off.
Well, that was the line I was referring to.
Weed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It is literally
and
that.
Then he never sees her again. And of course, in this interpretation of the film, maybe of course he never sees her again after that. Why would she ever want to talk to him again?
Yeah. It's basically like it's kind of a dive into the incel kind of mentality of people that are just kind of listless and directionless in life, and the kind of angst and resentment that can create. And when I was watching it, that was obviously something that I was kind of interested in, and particularly looking at that, there was in the film, you could interpret the father figure as kind of the pitfalls of the other side, of someone who is not beta male at all, is very kind of assertive and aggressive, and is going in this direction, and the pitfalls of someone that is overly that, as opposed to the pitfalls that he's falling in, which is someone that just doesn't really seem to have any kind of idea. He's kind of the poster boy for that. He went and did an arts degree, and he's a writer, but he doesn't know what to write. He doesn't have a story to tell. He doesn't have any kind of direction, or he doesn't really have anything to contribute or say.
And I think that sort of adds into the class or the that theme, in that this guy, if you look at that, let's say this movie continues on, and you see the next scene, he gets caught by the police, headlines come out, this criminal's son commits murder. He becomes another statistic. He becomes part of the systematic, through very lots of different variables involved here. Obviously, but it's sort of an interesting sort of way to look at that extra layer that this film has, because another interesting part of it that I found was sort of the social anxiety, because I've definitely suffered from some social anxiety, and those moments where you're just like, God, I don't know how to act, and like this character towards the beginning, I sort of had a little bit of sort of not empathy towards him, but I was like, oh yeah, I understand how you feel. And then as the film goes on, he actually becomes the antagonist. He becomes like a really detestable character, and it's a really sort of interesting journey you take with him, and how your perception of him changes. I was going to say, Benny, like knowing where this goes, like and not having that sort of, I guess, that flip flop within, like he's not an amazing character, but you're following on this journey. You're kind of at the beginning rooting for him, as you would any sort of protagonist. That quickly changes. But how is it watching it, knowing everything that happens in mind from that sort of character's perspective?
Like I said, the second viewing was so much better than the first. I don't know how much it changed it though. Jong-soo, I think, is so interesting. I love that character and that performance. I think he's somehow so, I don't understand how I find him so watchable and so interesting, despite being a character with like nothing there. Like he is not interesting, but I just find him so watchable. I guess just because of the way things are playing out in it. Yeah, I don't know. Steve Yeun as well is just, I think, the most amazing performance in this film. Like I mentioned earlier about, like I mentioned earlier about there only really being a couple of moments where you see him without Jung-soo present and without his kind of seeing his version of him. And without really changing too much, he just does seem like a completely different character. Like when we're seeing him from Jong-soo's perspective, he comes across as a complete fucking sociopath. He seems scary and dangerous, but then we see him on his own, and he just seems like a person, which I think is just a master.
And he's got all his friends over and whatnot, and from one sector of the film, you're like, oh, look at all these rich assholes. But the other perspective, he's like, oh, everyone's bringing a dish. There's a community aspect. they're friends. Like John Soo has a really negative perception on these guys. You know, there's a lot of gray area on this film. There's a lot of, and that's what I find so satisfying about it. I think to Connor's point, you know, could this film have had some fat trimmed on it? I think, like, I'm always for that. You know, I'm always, you know, me, the Sleeping Beauty. You know, I don't. Where what is it? Brevity is the soul of wit. Where we can trim the fat, let's do so. But you know, where this film was going towards the end, I was almost getting a little bit agitated within, like, I really fucking hope this delivers, and it did. And then I was like, oh, okay, that actually did deliver. So that makes sense within the context, and it sort of came full circle. So I don't know. Could you take bits out? Yeah, I'm sure you can, but did it need to? I'm not necessarily sure.
I've never, I think, looked at the timing on a film more.
Damn.
And like, I genuinely considered.
Oh, don't leave us in suspense, Connor.
You're gone, Connor.
Oh no, he's gone forever.
Well, I didn't want to hear the rest of that anyway.
I checked the time a lot, and I also, yeah. And I, at one point, I even considered, you know, just pausing it and watching the rest the next day. You know, I felt as though
you got me in the right headspace for this film. There's no doubt about that.
You do, but I also think that there is something to be said for, you know, for a story, or, you know, not conservative storytelling, but not wasting moments, right? And I appreciate a lull in a film, but if the entire film is a lull, I tend to think, all right, you could have probably done something to bring a little bit more to the table, or to structure it in a way where the same thing is conveyed with, you know, maybe not in 2 hours as opposed to 2.5 hours. I guarantee you, if you chopped out about half an hour of that film, it wouldn't be a worse film.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you'd necessarily notice it if you watched, you know, a 2-hour version of this. I don't think you'd be like, that's an incomplete film. But watching it again, watching it as, you know, knowing the whole, I said before, and I really think so. Just every moment in this film felt to me like it was contributing to that whole and to the meaning of it. I was just so enthralled every second of it.
John Soo,
and, you know, I mentioned before, I did fall asleep before.
John Soo has a point where he's driving around, and I swear to God, there's probably about 20 minutes of no dialogue in this film. And it was so compelling. I was really fascinated, and I don't, like, yes, Connor, can you take 20 minutes out of this film? Yeah. We go, final cut, take that out, take that out, take that out. But this film is so much about those, like, they're in the kitchen and they're making the food, and it's like this really day-to-day scenario that's kind of mundane and ordinary and not special. But that's kind of the point. So,
but I mean, but that was my, like,
you know what I
actual
mean?
question. Like, if you took that 20 or 30 minutes out, would it been a worse film? Like, would have the film suffered from it? And if you've got 30 minutes in a film that don't actually add to the film, then what's the point?
Well, I guess it all comes down to, you know, we could take the last 30 minutes out and we would technically have taken 30 minutes out. It's like, what are we actually taking out of the film? That's more what I'm...
The actual point that I'm making is it a worse film for doing that? If you took the last 30 minutes of that film, 100% it's a worse film.
No, but that's what I'm saying. If you take 30 minutes out, what 30 minutes are you taking out? Because different people will take different segments out, and you'll have a very different viewing experience. So it's hard to really say.
Yeah. I think that for me, I know that there was stuff in that film that I felt was unnecessary in terms of, like, actually adding to the character. It was like, more of what I had already seen. What would be an
example of that, I guess?
Specifically, I mean, it all kind of melds together at this point, which is kind of the point I'm making. There's a lot of, like, empty space, you know, shots or dialogue that I didn't feel particularly, you know, just, I mean, if you just, I don't have anything specific in my head, but, like, again, I could barely pick out a specific scene for you in that film.
Not to go in circles here, but yeah, I just completely disagree with the premise. I think every moment is so integral to this movie. I think him stabbing Ben at the end is just as important as him jerking off in Jaime's bedroom when she's not there.
And to that, do you know who he reminded me so much of? He reminded me so much of Shinji from Evangelion, like a more nasty Shinji, but he kind of had that unlikableness about him, and also the standing up jerking thing. That also was kind of like,
how did you guys feel about like the rampant
what?
One more time, Connor.
The rampant what?
Masturbation. That's what you missed.
Masturbation.
Yeah. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was such I mean, we'd call masturbation subtle, but such a effortless, wordless way to convey Jong-Soo's feelings about Jaime and what that means. Like, obviously, it sounds silly, like, yeah, he's jerking off in her bedroom when she's not there, but I think that speaks so much to his headspace. I think it's so important to the character.
The kind of what I talked about before. It kind of solidifies him as someone that is not willing to really take action and is more kind of like
a dreamer,
that wishful thinking. Yeah, and you're like, oh, it'll be great when she comes back. I won't have to do anything, and we'll just be in love or something like that. And then it's like, well, no, you actually have to do something.
You know what was a really interesting part of this film was the dream sequence and how kind of looks like a pirate. Sorry, your freeze frame just then, Connor, was brilliant. The where it melded the fact that Ben was committing arson on these random greenhouses, and when he burnt his mother's clothes after she left, and it sort of amalgamated these things. And I thought that was so true to my experience with dreams, where these just totally random parts of your lives collaborate into this story that you create. And it's like, I just thought that was like, yeah, that's really well done, and a very haunting image associated with it. And overall, I guess the overall imagery and whatnot was just really spectacular in this. It had a sort of like a soft palette about it. It wasn't sort of like a harsh film. It was like sort of had this sort of pastel aspect to it. It was really pretty and well thought out.
We haven't talked too much about the technical side here. This is a gorgeous movie. And I think that is so important for something so languid. Like, if you're just going to be sitting there looking at images, they better be good images. And my God, they really are.
Connor's just talking over the band.
No, I was just saying that's what I was talking about when I started. Like, I need to give credit where credit is due. Like, the craft of this movie, in terms of the technical direction, like the actual shooting, the music, I think it's all done really well. I think it's a really well shot film.
Did the theme remind you guys of Breaking Bad?
No.
It reminded me so much of Breaking Bad. It says like the sort of drum kind of thing and the bendy guitar. Yeah, it was. I got the vibes.
The score didn't stand out to me too much. At one moment, I thought was so beautiful was Jaime dancing topless at Jong-Soo's place. It's this weird little jazz moment. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
When she's doing the butterfly, like that is burnt.
It was really gorgeous, but I was like, I was thinking about it. I was like, why jazz? Like, this is such a departure from the palette of this film so far, which I suppose is kind of par for the course. But like, I was taken out of it for a moment.
That's what I love about Korean films and films outside of America, is they're not as afraid to change things up. Like, Parasite is a fucking journey, in my opinion. Like,
Parasite is 8 different genres in one.
and like, to go from the jazz thing, like, I was like, this is so, I'm in the moment here. This is appropriate. I wasn't like, oh, this feels against the palette of what's been set up. It's like, this is working great. And that moment, I can see it in my mind still. Like, it was so beautifully done.
A change in palette is a bad thing. I'm saying it definitely went against the grain of what had come before it in terms of like
from a bad perspective or an interesting perspective.
I'm not saying that at all. It's jarring, but that's, I think particularly for that scene, you find it like she's kind of transported into a different area, and the audience is suddenly kind of transported into this, like just with the different music, which doesn't seem to fit with what you had been seeing in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
as
I think
you said,
it's
George.
effective.
I think that's what's so interesting about Korean films is, yeah, they're just not afraid to do something that we as, Western viewers are maybe trained to think is antithetical to what a film should be doing. Yeah.
And I generally feel there's more of less of a kinetic editing style with Korean films. I feel like they just set up a beautiful shot and it's like, let's sit on this for a minute, and I'm like, yes, please continue this. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
I need to check out some more of this filmmaker's work, because this was
Agreed,
the first film in 8 years, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything else he's done. I've heard it's a bit more fantastical.
Yeah, I believe.
I think that sensibility kind of shines through in this.
Had a long break, so I'd be interested to see what else is rummaging around there. There was some scenes in the field that reminded me of a number of films, particularly Memories of Murder, which is another film by Bong Joon-ho that I highly encourage everyone to watch. Like, that is just a killer film.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, awesome. Like, the great recommendation, Benny. Like, I was really sort of like, at points I was sort of saying to Ash, my wife, like, I don't know where Benny's going with this one. I'm not sure if I'm fully on board. But as I said, once the ending came through and I sat down and thought about it a little bit, like, it came 360 for me, and it kind of all made sense, which was kind of like those albums like Deftones or Nine Inch Nails. Like, the first time you listen to it, you go, man, I really don't know. They changed up the style. Like, I'm not sure. But then you listen to it, you let it marinate, you soak it in, and then you're like, oh yeah, I get what they were trying to do here. And often those ones are more satisfying for me than the instant gratification.
Yeah. Ben, can I say that my fiance's sentiments were far less ambiguous than George's wife's? I think Taya wants to have some words with you.
Ashton watches.
I recommended this movie to you guys. No one else.
Sorry?
Yeah, Ash didn't watch
George?
this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I made Taya watch it with me, and she was like, Ben recommended this. And I was like, yeah. She's like, okay.
What kind of movies does Taya like? Let's get into this.
She's not really a big movie person, which is kind of brilliant because I get to show her all the films that I enjoy.
Poor soul.
For better or for worse for her.
We're going to watch every single King Arthur from Ridley Scott's Robin Hood to the Disney classic from 1977.
I haven't been that cruel. I've had mixed success. She was really on board with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Didn't make her watch The Hobbit because I'm not that cruel. Star Wars was a whole, that was a roller coaster.
Journey.
That is a roller coaster.
Yeah. And and to be honest, I'm trying to reciprocate. So we're watching some series that are they're in Egypt. They're series are really big, particularly around now, around Ramadan, because it's fuck else is anyone going to do? So they this is when Egyptians release all their content and right. So I was like, yeah, we'll check out a few of those.
Cool. Nice one.
We don't follow Ramadan. We'll watch the TV, I suppose.
You'll take the onslaught of content. Yeah. Well, Benny,
we'll report back on that.
Nice one. Benny, is there any final thoughts on Burning since you brought it to the table, or we kind of summed it all up?
Yeah, I was so happy to revisit this. This is a movie I suggested, not just because I wanted you guys to see it, because I really wanted to see it again. I just find it utterly beguiling. I think
that's the word. That is the word. Beguiling.
Yeah. I really think this movie is one for the absolute fucking ages. I can't remember my entire list of the best movies of 2018, but this is right up there. I think if we ever get around to doing a top 10 of the decade or something, this one's gonna fucking fly. I think this is just part of the fucking canon of cinema. I know I sound like I'm overstating it, but that my viewing of it this time really was that great and that dense. And I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, to varying degrees.
I don't know if Connor enjoyed it, but I did.
Good.
He looks a bit glum. He looks a bit glum right now. I love these little freeze frames we get with him. So I guess I am in the hot seat this week. Movie book club episode 3. So I have a number of films rummaging around in my head. Some that I haven't seen, some that I haven't seen for a while. So we'll be able to work through these as a team. But I was just on YouTube this morning, and up comes Christian Bale's funniest moments, and it's a 7-minute video, and I was pissing myself laughing. I was like, Christian Bale is he's a really interesting character. And so I was thinking, like, I'd love to revisit, and then in conjunction with that, I would love to revisit a film that I haven't seen in a long time, and it's been sort of, again, rummaging around in the back of my mind. So I thought, let's check out American Psycho. It's been a while. And brilliant. We've kind of been doing these sort of thriller mystery things. So I was
that's a brilliant companion piece to Burning, I think.
Well, yeah, I thought exactly the same thing. So, guys, for next week, dial in American Psycho. And if you haven't seen it, enjoy. And I'm looking forward to seeing this again, because every time you see it, I feel like it's a totally new perspective. So that'll be fun. What an episode. Yay. Movie Book Club episode 2 done. Hey, we'll be back next week. It's going to be fun. Connor, have a lovely evening. Benny, we'll see you next time.
You too, guys.
Yep.
And stay well. Stay happy.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.